Verses 18 to 20. He must write himself a copy of the law out of the original, which was in the custody of the priests that attended the sanctuary, v. 18. Some think that he was to write only this book of Deuteronomy, which is an abstract of the law, and the precepts of which, being mostly moral and judicial, concerned the king more than the laws in Leviticus and Numbers, which, being ceremonial, concerned chiefly the priests. Others think that he was to transcribe all the 5 books of Moses, which are called the law, and which were preserved together as the foundation of their religion. Though the king might be presumed to have very fair copies by him from his ancestors, yet, besides those, he must have one of his own. It might be presumed that theirs were worn with constant use. He must have a fresh one to begin the world with. Though he had secretaries about him whom he might employ to write this copy, and who perhaps could write a better hand than he, yet he must do it himself, with his own hand, for the honor of the law, and that he might think no act of religion below him, to inure himself to labor and study, and especially that he might thereby be obliged to take particular notice of every part of the law, and by writing it might imprint it in his mind. Note: it is of great use for each of us to write down what we observe as most affecting and edifying to us, out of the scriptures and good books, and out of the sermons we hear. A prudent pen may go far towards making up the deficiencies of the memory, and the furnishing of the treasures of the good householder with things new and old. He must do this even when he sits upon the throne of his kingdom, provided that he had not done it before. When he begins to apply himself to business, he must apply himself to this in the first place. He that sits upon the throne of a kingdom cannot but have his hands full. The affairs of his kingdom both at home and abroad call for a large share of his time and thoughts, and yet he must write himself a copy of the law. Let not those who call themselves men of business think that this will excuse them from making religion their business, nor let great men think it any disparagement to them to write for themselves those great things of God's law which he hath written to them. Hos 8:12. Having a Bible by him of his own writing, he must not think it enough to keep it in his cabinet, but he must read therein all the days of his life. v. 19. It is not enough to have Bibles, but we must use them daily, as the duty and necessity of every day require. Our souls must have their constant meals of that manna, and, if well digested, it will be true nourishment and strength to them. As the body is receiving benefit by its food continually, and not only when it is eating, so is the soul, by the word of God, if it meditate therein day and night. PS 1:2. And we must persevere in the use of the written word of God as long as we live. Christ's scholars never learn above their Bibles, but will have a constant occasion for them till they come to that world where knowledge and love will both be made perfect. His writing and reading were all nothing if he did not reduce to practice what he wrote and read. v. 19:20. The Word of God is not designed merely to be an entertaining subject of speculation, but to be a commanding rule of conversation. Let him know what dominion his religion must have over him, and what influence it must have upon him. First, it must possess him with a very reverent and awful regard to the divine majesty and authority. He must learn, and thus the most learned must by ever learning, to fear the Lord his God, and, as high as he is, he must remember that God is above him, and, whatever fear his subjects owe to him, that, and much more, he owes to God as his king. Secondly, it must engage him to a constant observance of the law of God, and a conscientious obedience to it, as the effect of that fear. He must keep all the words of this law. He is custos utrius qui tabuli, the keeper of both tables, not only take care that others do them, but do them himself as a humble servant to the God of heaven and a good example to his inferiors. Thirdly, it must keep him humble. How much soever he is advanced, let him keep his spirit low, and let the fear of his God prevent the contempt of his brethren, and let not his heart be lifted up above them, so as to carry himself haughtily or disdainfully towards them, and to trample upon them. Let him not conceit himself better than they because he is greater and makes a fairer show, but let him remember that he is the minister of God to them for good, major singulis, but minor universus, greater than any one, but less than the whole. It must prevent his errors, either on he right hand or on the left, for there are errors on both hands, and keep him right, in all instances, to his God and to his duty. What advantage his religion would be of to him. Those that fear God and keep his commandments will certainly fare the better for it in this world. The greatest monarch in the world may receive more benefit by religion than by all the wealth and power of his monarchy. It will be of advantage, first, to his person, he shall prolong his days in his kingdom. We find in the history of the kings of Judah that, generally, the best reigns were the longest, except when God shortened them for the punishment of the people, as Josiah's. Secondly, to his family, his children shall also prosper. Entail religion upon posterity, and God will entail a blessing upon it.